Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're tackling a really fascinating piece. It's a dialogue called The Simple Minds.
And the title sounds straightforward,
Mm,
but the ideas packed in there,
they really make you think.
they absolutely do. We're basically asking this big analytical question based on the material. What does it actually mean for a mind to function, well, simply?
And what happens when that way of thinking becomes, widespread?
Exactly. Now, just for a tiny bit of context from the author's earlier stuff, they set this up very clearly. This isn't about judging people.
Right. They mention not being able to personally hate or love this potentially huge group, maybe 98% of people who might fit this simple category.
Because they just don't know them personally. It's purely analytical.
It's about studying a way of functioning, not making a moral statement, which is important to keep in mind.
Definitely sets the tone. Okay, so let's dive in. What is the core thing, the mechanism, that defines a simple mind according to this specific dialogue? Well, it starts right away with a definition. The source says simple minds. They belong to people who do not possess certain abilities.
Okay, lacking certain ability.
But, and this is the crucial part, the real pivot, the text says they could often acquire these abilities.
Yeah. So it's not an inherent lack, like they can't learn.
Precisely. It states, but for various reasons do not want to.
Wow. Okay, that distinction between can't and don't want, that changes everything.
It really does. It frames simplicity not as some fixed deficit, but as, well, almost a choice, or maybe a lack of awareness about the choice.
A kind of self-limitation. If potentially most people could get these mental tools but just don't, what does that imply? About curiosity, maybe?
Right.
Effort?
It puts all the weight on desire, doesn't it? Or the absence of it, that lack of want. It becomes a barrier just as real as any intellectual limitation.
So, like, someone sees a potentially useful way of thinking, maybe complex analysis or deep self-reflection, but they just don't feel the urge to pick it up.
Exactly. Maybe they don't see the point, or maybe their current way of thinking feels comfortable, safe. Why rock the boat?
Voluntary intellectual inertia. Got it. And this inertia points directly to the main ability gap the dialogue focuses on, which is reflection.
Spot on. Reflection, self-analysis.
Yeah.
That's the dividing line here between simple and not simple.
The source does acknowledge that, a little bit of reflection is kind of trendy, right? Like basic self-help stuff.
It mentions that, but it stresses that simple people do not go further than that kind of minimal level.
So they can ask that first basic question, maybe like, okay, what made me think that? Or why am I feeling this way?
Yeah, they can trace a feeling back to an immediate trigger, like, I'm annoyed because my boss said that.
But they stop right there. They don't go deeper.
That's the point that dialogue makes. They hit that first answer and
Yeah.
that's it. That's it. The text says clearly, simple people do not go further than this.
So no asking the next level questions like, why does this kind of comment always trigger me? Or what assumptions am I making here? Is this reaction actually helpful?
None of that,
Yeah.
which is why their reflection gets described as, well, superficial and useless for them.
Superficial and useless. Oof. That's harsh, but analytically precise, I guess. It's like noticing you have a cough versus figuring out why you have the cough.
Exactly. And it makes you think, doesn't it? When was the last time you, listening now, really pushed past that first easy answer when you felt stressed or challenged?
It takes effort, real mental effort. And maybe that effort, that want to exert it, is the actual dividing line.
And here's where it scales up from personal to societal. Because, okay, one person choosing not to reflect deeply, maybe that's their business.
But if this becomes the default mode for a huge majority, like that 98% figure the author floated earlier,
Then it's not just personal anymore. The dialogue states that these simple minds often bring the rest, although relatively small, part of the population a lot of trouble.
the friction, the clash between a majority that's maybe easily swayed and a minority that's digging deeper and seeing perhaps unpleasant patterns.
Precisely. And to illustrate this danger, the text uses a thought experiment. Imagine a society, right? Pure collective decision-making, an ideal democracy in a period of prosperity.
Everything seems fair, everyone votes, life is generally good, stable.
Stable. Until someone enters the picture who has two things, money and skill in manipulation.
The expert influencer.
Right. The threat shows up when someone who very well understands psychotechnologies and has the cash to deploy them gets involved.
Okay, we need a pause on psychotechnologies. That
Yeah.
sounds pretty dramatic. Are we talking like mind control rays?
No, probably not that sci-fi. It's more about sophisticated persuasion techniques. Think mass psychology, media framing, crafting narratives.
Stuff designed to bypass critical thinking.
Exactly. Because if the simple mind stops at that first level, what made me think that? These techniques just need to provide a convincing, easy first-level answer.
They feed you the answer you're predisposed to stop at anyway.
Pretty much. They exploit that, lack of reflective follow-through.
So the dialogue asks that rhetorical question. Is such a person capable of turning the so-called public opinion toward the decisions that are beneficial to him?
And the answer to the text is just obvious.
Yeah, obvious and worrying. Because this engineered opinion, it says, directly threatens the deterioration of living conditions for all members of society.
And here's the really sobering part. Even when things objectively get worse for everyone, like measurably worse.
It's still possible to convince the majority that it's not so bad.
That's what it says. It turns out that it is not very difficult to convince those same simple people that their life is not so unbearable.
They accept the story over their own experience. Wow.
That really highlights the uselessness of that superficial reflection, doesn't it? If
Yeah.
you were reflecting deeply, worsening conditions would absolutely trigger those deeper why questions.
Questions the manipulator probably can't easily answer convincingly.
Right. But without that push, people might just accept the reassuring slogan or the blame pointed elsewhere.
Okay, so this leads to a really interesting philosophical clash in the dialogue. The author's friend pushes back, right? Kind of defends the majority.
Yeah, the friend brings up the classic democratic argument. But if the majority believes that not all is so bad, then it is so, isn't it?
Reality is just what most people agree it is, pure consensus.
It's a powerful idea.
But how does the author deal with that, especially given that potential 98% figure, which, let's be honest, sounds pretty elitist, even if it's meant analytically?
The response is very precise. To the friend's question, if the majority believes it, isn't it so? The answer is yes, of course.
Okay, so acknowledging the majority's perceived reality is their reality.
Yes, but that acceptance immediately pivots to the problem this creates for the minority. The issue isn't necessarily that the majority is wrong in their perception.
It's about the practical dilemma for those who see things differently.
Exactly. The focus shifts. What to do with the rest who are capable of reflection and realize how they live, what they strive for, what life they would like to build?
So the core friction is between the reality perceived by the majority, potentially shaped by those psychotechnologies, and the reality analyzed by the minority.
And that analyzed reality might suggest things are actually not okay and need changing, but they're stuck within the consensus.
This is painting a pretty bleak picture of how societies might function or malfunction. Is there any way out? An antidote?
Thankfully, yes. The conclusion isn't despair at all. It's actually quite action-oriented. The summary is put very simply, and the summary is simple. One can become not simple.
Ah, that's the hopeful note. It completely rejects the idea that this is some fixed state you're born into.
Absolutely. The dialogue is explicit. There are fully studied and tested ways to move out of that simple mode of operating.
Fully studied and tested ways.
Okay, but there's a catch, isn't there? A condition.
One huge condition. It all hinges on interest. Genuine internal interest.
Back to the want. Back to the want. The text states very clearly, if that interest, that desire isn't there, then the person will not change, since all that he does in his life, he does from his want.
Everything stems from desire. So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it. Reflect deeply.
Something like that. It recognizes that critical thinking, continuous questioning, deep analysis, the stuff that makes one not simple, it takes discipline. It takes ongoing effort.
And you can't force someone to want to make that effort. It has to come from within.
It's not about just, reading one book or taking one weekend course.
Yeah.
It's about adopting a whole mindset, a practice.
Constantly pushing past those easy level 1 answers, actively looking for the uncomfortable questions, maybe, challenging your own assumptions.
Replacing that intellectual inertia we talked about with real curiosity, real drive.
The way this dialogue drills down into these distinctions, it really feels like part of a larger project.
Oh, definitely. The author seems to be building a kind of map of consciousness, exploring these different capabilities. You get the sense there's more to come.
We're definitely keen to see where it goes next. Okay, so let's recap the big takeaways from this specific discussion.
All right. So first, simplicity here isn't about raw intelligence. It's defined by a lack of want to reflect deeply.
Second, this lack of deep reflection creates a vulnerability, makes individuals, and therefore societies, susceptible to manipulation those psychotechnologies.
And third, the potential to change, to become not simple, is there. It's possible.
But, and this is the big but, it absolutely depends on genuine internal desire, on that want.
Which leads to a great question for you, the listener, to chew on.
Right. If real change, real deep reflection hinges entirely on wanting it. Think about your own life, your work, your studies, even relationships.
How much of the effort you put in is driven by that deep, genuine desire versus, well, just external expectations, social pressure, going through the motions.
Are you operating mostly on those level 1 questions and answers, or are you pushing for the deeper analysis? It's something to really consider.
That's the thought for this week. If you want a life that's truly examined, the first step is finding, or maybe cultivating, the genuine want for that examination.
And because these ideas really build on each other, we definitely recommend checking out the previous discussions.
Yeah, hop over to the channel page. Understanding the earlier context really helps grasp the nuances here. It's all connected.
And as always, you can listen to this deep dive as a podcast wherever you get your audio. But for the full journey, the channel page has all the previous releases.
Keep thinking. Keep questioning that first answer. Strive for that next level. We'll talk to you soon.